Do you ever feel like your team is completely dysfunctional? Maybe it feels like nothing's going right, or perhaps sales are up, profit is up, but team members keep complaining. Maybe they use the word dysfunctional, or they say, I feel like I can't get along with my teammates, or we have a culture that's broken. I want to talk today about the 5 dysfunctions of a team and how a Christian leader would address those 5 dysfunctions. Of course, this is the title of a classic book by Patrick Lencioni. Lencioni was born in the mid-1960s. He was the founder of the Table Group. He's written 13 books. Some of them have been bestsellers, and a few of them have been particularly popular. The Ideal Team Player is an excellent one that I remember reading years ago. My actual copy of the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team is at my home, or I could hold it up for you. But many books that he's written, he's talked about the different types of personality traits, things that he's talked about. He actually calls those the 6 types of working geniuses. So that's kind of a really popular thing he's been doing now and training coaches on that. But Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, is a classic for good reason. I want to talk through those 5 dysfunctions and how to address each of them. The number 1 dysfunction that Lencioni talks about is the absence of trust. What do we mean by that? When trust is absent, what's the problem? Well, people feel like they can't really tell the boss about their failures. They maybe can't say what they're really thinking. Team members don't trust each other. Maybe they're reporting each other and kind of turning each other in and almost like tattletales. There's just no foundation of trust. Team members will actually try to hide their mistakes. And this creates a culture of fear and also a culture of distance, where the leader's way up here, but he or she doesn't know what's going on in the lives of the team members. How do you address that culture of distrust and lack of trust in your boss or in your teammates? Let me give you some specific ways. Number 1, you need to model vulnerability and transparency as the leader. Be quick to admit when you mess up. I found this even leading my home. My wife and I have 5 wonderful kids. Our oldest is 14, our youngest is 7. And my wife and I, as the leaders of the home, we try to admit when we make mistakes and be vulnerable ourselves, because we want our kids to tell us not just their highest moments, but also their lowest moments. We want them to be vulnerable with us, and it helps if we're vulnerable with them. Even when my kids were very young, there were times that I had to get down on my knees as a dad and look my little 3-year-old or 4-year-old in the face and say, I'm sorry. I sinned. I messed up. I thought we were going to go to the park today and we didn't get to. Will you forgive me? So modeling that vulnerability yourself as the leader is a huge step forward. A second step is to create safe places where people can express their discontent without fear of punishment. And I know the idea of safe spaces, there's certain college campuses or whatever that maybe have taken this a little too far, or maybe you think that's some woke idea. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm just saying, for instance, in one of my businesses last week, we rolled out a completely anonymous survey that's being done by a third party, because we want people to express freely what they really think and know that it's not going to link back to them or have any negative repercussions for their job or their salary. So create places where people can give you really valid and actual transparent feedback. Thirdly, it's good to start meetings with just a checkup, going around and maybe saying, what's your high from last week? What's your low from last week? I do something similar to this with my kids. Oftentimes on the way into school, we do high-low buffalo, where they'll tell me their high point from the day before, their low point from the day before, and then the buffalo is just some weird random fact. Like my 8-year-old today talked about seeing an owl swoop down and catch a mouse, and that was just an unusual thing. Doesn't happen every day, so that could be the buffalo. You don't necessarily need to do high-low buffalo with your team, but something where they're telling you their highs but also their lows, and it gives them the freedom to admit that they made a mistake without fear of repercussion. You want to build trust in your team. Another possibility would be to encourage peer-to-peer engagement, where there's some kind of partner that they work with, or there's someone on their team, and each of them can relate their strengths and weaknesses to each other. And so it's a really open environment for mutual sharing, and that helps build trust. Another possibility would do personality assessments, whether it's Enneagram. My wife loves the Enneagram. Maybe it's the DISC assessment. There are many of these. And for you as maybe the leader of the team to sit down with someone and just walk through the thing about the Enneagram or the DISC or whatever is it shows the pros and the cons, the strengths and the weaknesses of virtually any personality type. And that might be a really good way to start addressing those various things, and that can help build trust with your team. The second major dysfunction of a team that Lencioni talks about is a fear of conflict. Do you have this with your team? This sort of artificial harmony. Nobody wants to ever disagree with the boss. Nobody wants to ever push back on the leader. There's this unnatural fear of conflict. So maybe to an outside observer, it looks like everybody's best friends. No one ever argues. Nobody ever pushes back. Wow, this must be a really incredible culture. There's no conflict whatsoever. But it's this fake harmony. It's not real. And that's not what you want as a leader. If nobody ever pushes back on your idea, then why do you have them in the room, right? So how can you address this dysfunction, this fear of conflict as a leader in your business or your ministry, wherever you're leading? Here's a few ideas of how to address this dysfunction of the fear of conflict. Number one, you can establish rules of engagement. In other words, set some priorities, because you don't want people screaming at each other, yelling at each other, being sarcastic, making things personal. So talk about tone, talk about respect, talk about the proper way to disagree. We can all at times agree to disagree, but can we do that agreeably? So set some rules of engagement. Secondly, explicitly ask for differing viewpoints. Maybe you present a new idea to your team and you say, hey, I want some pushback on that. Does anybody see that differently? Does anybody see the pitfalls with this? I listed some pros, what I think might be a good idea for us to move to this model, but some of the rest of you, what are things you would push back on? Specifically ask for that. That will help erase some of that fear of conflict. Thirdly, reward those who give constructive criticism. When someone does criticize your idea, don't immediately push back, or even you could just kind of listen and then move on as if like, I wish they hadn't said that. And instead praise them. Thank you so much for saying that. I had not thought of that, but you're right. That could be a big problem with this new initiative that I'm thinking of. Thank you so much. So those that offer constructive criticism, praise them highly. Fourthly, it will help you if you can depersonalize conflicts by using specific data points. So make it about the numbers, make it about the data. Well, we tried this before, but sales actually went down 14%. That's better than, well, I don't like Ted's idea. You don't want it to be personal. You want conflict to be data driven. That will help keep it far more objective and less messy. A final thing to think of here is, as a leader, you want to be sure you're not shutting down disagreement or debate too quickly. I think especially for some Christian leaders, they're afraid of healthy debate. And so it's tempting as a leader, when two people disagree, you're afraid someone's feelings are going to get hurt. And so you just immediately shut it down and change the subject. That's not healthy. You want time, again, not for people to get carnal, but to have healthy disagreement and debate. What's the third dysfunction of a team that Lencioni talks about? The third dysfunction, and many of you have seen this probably in your organizations before, is a lack of commitment. There's no buy-in. You as the leader are headed a certain direction and your followers are very half-hearted at best. There's just a lack of commitment and buy-in to the vision or the mission of the leadership. How do you address that? Number one, you can end meetings by doing a quick recap of what we've talked about, decisions that we've made, and responsibilities. Who's going to carry this ball forward and what's their deadline? What's the decision, the responsibility, and the deadline? So Susan's going to follow up on this, and at our next weekly meeting, she's going to tell us the conclusion she came to. So for one thing, it's hard for people sometimes to buy in because they don't fully understand the vision or the mission. So you want a lot of clarity, and a lot of times you can do that at the end of a meeting by recapping exactly what's been covered, who's going to handle what, and when. Another thing you can do, and you want to be careful about this, but you can actually ask your team members for their verbal support. Do you agree with that? Do you think we're headed the right direction here? Because oftentimes if someone says, yes, I think we're making the right decision here, even that verbal agreement by itself is an extra form of buy-in. You can create scorecards, do something visual. Maybe you have a dashboard in your software where you can show people, here's the goals we set and here's how close we're getting. And often that, picture is worth 1,000 words. That visual reminder will help a lot of people. You want to encourage questions and healthy debate. You want to, in other words, if you just railroad something through, it's going to be almost impossible to get buy-in. But if you come up with an idea, or someone else on the team comes up with an idea, and you take lots of questions, there's lots of healthy debate, that's going to help so much for the whole team to buy in, rather than some half-hearted, well, I guess we're going to try this time. Another thing you want to do is to celebrate milestones. to celebrate when you get to that point. Make a big deal about that. We set this goal and we hit it. We had this KPI and we made it. By God's grace, we got there. Make a big celebration of that. That will encourage them the next time to really work towards hitting that goal. You want your team to buy in. You're all working together on this. Matthew 5:37 says, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no." And when we make a commitment and we buy in, that can be honoring both to God and to the team. What's the fourth dysfunction that Lencioni talks about? The fourth dysfunction is avoiding accountability. No one wants to hold their peers or even the people that answer to them accountable. People are afraid of that conflict again, which touches on another one. But if you have a team that avoids accountability, that never wants anyone to hold them accountable, that's a recipe for disaster. How do you address that biblically? Number one, make sure your goals are owned by the whole team, not just the leader. It's easier to hold someone accountable if they've really bought into that goal, which we just talked about previously. So make sure the whole team owns the goal, not just the leader. Number two, normalize peer feedback. That should be a normal part of your business, that other people are giving each other feedback. If you go for months and nobody gets any feedback, and then you give someone negative feedback, that'll feel crushing to them. But if that's just a normal part of your business, giving healthy peer-to-peer feedback, that will really help you with this fourth point. Using public scorecards, we talked about this earlier with a dashboard, that can be a big way to normalize this and help with this particular dysfunction. You can celebrate courageous accountability moments when someone holds themselves accountable, when someone holds someone else accountable in the right way. You can celebrate that. You can talk to them and say, thank you so much. Your team was kind of going off the rails here and you caught it and you held them accountable. And I appreciate that so much, and that helps out the whole team. Finally, as a leader, it's very important that when you issue some kind of correction or accountability, that you do it in the right way, maybe one-on-one, not embarrassing someone in front of the whole team. And you do it out of respect, and you do it as a way to help that person improve. You've found a weakness, they dropped the ball somewhere, but you're never trying to shame them. You're not trying to humiliate them. You're not trying to act like they're dumb. It's coming alongside them as a brother or sister and building them up and helping them see their shortcoming, but doing it in a very kind and loving way. We should do this exact same thing with our kids. Galatians 6:1 in the Bible, and I know this is a little bit different, but it says, "Brothers, if someone is overtaken in a sin, ye which are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of meekness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted." And I'm not necessarily talking here in your business about a sin. I mean, maybe there was a sin, maybe someone was embezzling money, but oftentimes just a shortcoming. But realize that you're not perfect, so approach them humbly and in a kind way, and that will go a long way. The fifth dysfunction that Lencioni talks about is inattention to results, that people let their ego get in the way, their own personal goal, their own personal agenda, and they quit focusing on the results. Is our business accomplishing its mission? Is our church, is our ministry doing what we set out to do? It's not personality driven. It's not a personality cult. This inattention to results can be destructive. How can you address that? Well, number one, you need clear, measurable outcomes. And those outcomes need to apply to the whole team, not just the leadership. So have clear, measurable outcomes. Secondly, tie your rewards. Maybe that's public recognition. Maybe that's a bonus. Tie your rewards to specific KPIs, to actual measurable outcomes, rather than, well, this guy butters me up at work, so I'm going to give him an extra bonus. Make it very clear, very specific. That will help your team if they're struggling with inattention to results. It's going to help them focus on the results because their rewards will be specifically tied to those results. Thirdly, constantly re-emphasize the mission. This is why we're doing what we're doing. Simon Sinek says, begin with why. It's not just I'm coming in and I'm selling a product or I'm making a widget. I'm doing this because of such and such. There's the famous story about, I think it was one of the presidents was visiting NASA and he saw a janitor, and the janitor was working really hard and he was cleaning a hallway. And the president said to him, "Good job. What motivates you to clean this hallway? And what is your job here?" And rather than saying, "Well, I'm a janitor," the guy says, "I helped put a man on the moon." Right? He was focused on the bigger mission. You want your team to do that. Remove distractions. Sometimes there's all these little side things going on. Maybe someone had an idea. Maybe it was a good idea, but it's distracting you from the main goal. You need to be laser focused on keeping the main thing. And then celebrate results as a group. Even if there's one particular member who does a great job, you can honor him or her. You should, but have the whole group get to celebrate. You win or lose as a team. And just like All 5 of my kids are on soccer teams, and one person might score the winning goal, but it's the whole team that wins. So celebrate as a team. 1 Corinthians 10:31, if you've ever been to the Wilds Christian camp, they quote this at every meal: whether therefore you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. So those are the 5 dysfunctions of a team. We talked about absence of trust. Secondly, fear of conflict. Third, lack of commitment. Fourth, avoidance of accountability. And the 5th dysfunction we talked about is inattention to results. Under each one, I tried to give you some practical, concrete, helpful suggestions. I think all of us, no matter how many teams we're in charge of, how many businesses we run, or ministries that God has blessed us to help with, we all realize that virtually every team has some level of dysfunction. So hopefully this is helpful to you in addressing that dysfunction. If you found it helpful, I'd encourage you to follow the YouTube channel here. We try to give practical advice for Christian leaders.